Nobody in the hotel lobby understood why the elegant woman would be crying the next morning, but 5 hours earlier, she had been nothing more than a stranger standing in the snow asking for a room. Outside, the winter storm showed no mercy. Thick snow hammered the streets of Aspen Ridge, Colorado, while icy wind pushed against buildings with a force that rattled windows and shook street signs. Cars moved slowly through the darkness. Headlights disappeared behind swirling sheets of white. It was the kind of night that made people grateful for a warm bed and a locked door. Inside the historic Grand Summit Hotel, guests crowded near the fireplace while employees rushed between the front desk and the entrance. Every room in the building had been booked for hours. The storm had stranded travelers from across the state, and the hotel was now operating at full capacity. At exactly 10:47 p.m., a tired man carrying a small duffel bag stepped through the revolving door with his 12-year-old daughter beside him. Ethan Carter brushed snow from his jacket and looked around the crowded lobby. His daughter Lily tightened her grip on his hand. "Are we finally here?" she asked. Ethan smiled despite his exhaustion. "We made it." The smile looked genuine, but it hid a difficult day. Ethan had spent the last 10 hours driving through dangerous weather after a heating repair job in a neighboring county had taken far longer than expected. The storm arrived sooner than forecasted. Roads closed. Visibility vanished. More than once he considered stopping somewhere else, but every motel they passed was already full. The reservation at the Grand Summit had become their only option. Lily looked toward the fireplace where several families sat drinking hot chocolate. "That looks nice." "It does." Ethan squeezed her shoulder gently. "We will be warm soon." They approached the front desk. The young receptionist looked relieved when she found Ethan's reservation in the system. "Mr. Carter? That is me. You are lucky. You have the last available room in the entire hotel." Ethan laughed softly. "Believe me, I know." The receptionist handed him a key card. "Room 814. Elevators are around the corner." Lily's face brightened immediately. After hours trapped in a truck during a snowstorm, the promise of a warm room felt like winning the lottery. Ethan picked up the key card and thanked the receptionist. Then the front doors opened again. A blast of freezing air swept through the lobby. Several guests turned toward the entrance. A woman stepped inside. She looked exhausted. Snow covered her dark wool coat. Her hair was damp from the storm. She carried no luggage except a small leather bag hanging from one shoulder. For a brief moment, she simply stood there catching her breath. Then she approached the front desk. "Please tell me you have one room left." Her voice was calm, but there was urgency beneath it. The receptionist's expression immediately fell. "I am sorry, ma'am. We just gave away our final room." Silence followed. The woman closed her eyes briefly. Not dramatic, not angry, just disappointed. Ethan noticed something unusual. Most people in that situation would have argued, demanded exceptions, complained. She did none of those things. "I understand," she said quietly. "Do you know another hotel nearby?" The receptionist shook her head. "Everything within 50 miles is sold out because of the storm." The woman glanced toward the windows. Outside, snow continued falling harder than ever. Ethan watched her for a moment. Something about her expression stayed with him. Not fear, not frustration, weariness, the kind that comes from carrying more than physical exhaustion. Lily noticed it too. Children often saw things adults missed. "Dad," she whispered. Ethan looked down. Lily looked toward the woman and then back at him. She did not say anything else. She did not have to. Ethan knew that look. He had seen it before. It was the same look Rachel used to give him whenever kindness required sacrifice. Ethan glanced at the room, key resting in his hand. Then toward the woman standing alone near the desk. Then back toward his daughter. The storm howled against the glass. The lobby lights reflected across the snow outside. Somewhere deep inside, a decision had already begun forming, though Ethan was not ready to admit it yet. Because sometimes the smallest choices arrive disguised as inconveniences, and sometimes they arrive carrying enough grace to change several lives before the night is over. The woman remained near the front desk, while snow continued battering the windows behind her. Guests returned to their conversations. The receptionist looked helpless. The storm was worsening by the minute, and every room in the hotel was occupied. Ethan stared at the key card resting in his hand. Room 814. The last room. The safe choice. The practical choice. The choice any reasonable father would make. Lily quietly watched him. She knew that expression. It was the same expression he wore whenever someone needed help, and helping them would make life harder. Ethan sighed softly. You noticed too, huh? Lily nodded. She looks tired. Ethan glanced toward the woman again. Yeah, Mom would have helped. The words landed gently, but they carried weight. Rachel had been gone for 4 years. Yet somehow she still managed to influence conversations inside her family. Ethan smiled sadly. Your mom helped everybody. Exactly. Lily folded her arms. That is why people loved her. Ethan looked down at the key card. Outside, the storm howled louder. The lobby lights flickered once before stabilizing. For a moment, he imagined putting Lily to bed in a warm room upstairs. He imagined hot showers, clean sheets, a safe night away from the weather. Then he imagined the woman walking back into the storm alone. Neither option felt comfortable anymore. The receptionist was apologizing again. I truly wish I could help. The woman offered a tired smile. It is not your fault. She picked up her small leather bag. Thank you anyway. Ethan made his decision before he could talk himself out of it. Excuse me. The woman turned. The receptionist turned. Even Lily looked up despite already knowing what was about to happen. Ethan walked toward the desk and held out the key card. You can take my room. Silence settled over the lobby. The woman blinked. What? Ethan shrugged awkwardly. You heard me. No. She shook her head immediately. Absolutely not. It is fine. It is not fine. She glanced toward Lily. You have a daughter. Ethan smiled. I noticed. The woman almost laughed despite herself. You need the room. Maybe. Ethan looked toward the snow outside. Looks like you do too. For several seconds, she said nothing. Her eyes studied him carefully, as if trying to understand why a stranger would make such an offer. I cannot accept that. Ethan placed the key card on the counter. Sure you can. Why would you do this? The question seemed genuine. Ethan thought for a moment. Because if my wife were standing here, she would expect me to. The answer changed something in the woman's expression. Not dramatically, just enough for Ethan to notice. Your wife. She passed away a few years ago. The woman lowered her eyes briefly. I am sorry. Thank you. Lily stepped closer. She was really nice. The woman smiled softly. I believe that. The receptionist looked back and forth between them. Mr. Carter, are you absolutely sure? Ethan nodded. Put the room in her name. Dad, Lily said. Ethan looked down. Lily grinned. I think Mom would approve. Ethan laughed quietly. Yeah, I think so too. The woman hesitated one final time. Then she picked up the key card. Her fingers tightened around it. I do not know what to say. Ethan shrugged. Try getting some sleep. For the first time since entering the hotel, she smiled fully. It transformed her face. Not because it was glamorous, because it looked real. Thank you. You are welcome. She started toward the elevators before stopping. My name is Olivia. Ethan nodded. Ethan. She glanced toward Lily. And you? Lily. Olivia smiled. It is nice to meet both of you. Then the elevator doors opened, and she disappeared inside. The lobby returned to normal surprisingly fast. Conversations resumed. Guests drifted toward the restaurant. The receptionist completed paperwork. Yet Ethan could not ignore the feeling that something unusual had just happened. Not important. Not dramatic. Just unusual. Lily tugged on his sleeve. So where are we sleeping? Ethan looked toward the parking lot outside. Snow covered nearly every vehicle. His old pickup truck sat beneath a layer of white near the far corner. I have an idea. 20 minutes later, father and daughter sat inside the truck beneath several blankets stored behind the seats. The heater ran intermittently to conserve fuel. Lily sipped hot chocolate purchased from the hotel cafe. Ethan adjusted another blanket around her shoulders. Comfortable, sort of. That is not exactly a glowing review. Lily laughed. It feels like camping. Winter camping. Fancy winter camping. Ethan looked through the windshield toward the illuminated hotel. Somewhere on the 8th floor, a stranger was warm tonight because of a choice he made in less than 30 seconds. He did not know her story. He did not know where she came from. He certainly did not know why. Every few hours he woke to check the heater, making sure the cab remained warm enough for his daughter. The arrangement was far from comfortable, but he never complained. Parenthood had taught him something important years ago. Comfort was optional. Responsibility was not. Around 3 in the morning, Ethan opened his eyes and looked through the windshield. The hotel stood illuminated against the darkness. Hundreds of windows glowed warmly through the snowfall. Somewhere inside that building, A woman he would probably never see again was sleeping safely because of a decision he had made in the lobby. The thought brought him a strange sense of peace. Then he adjusted his jacket, checked on Lily one more time, and drifted back to sleep. Sunrise arrived slowly. Pale winter light filtered through gray clouds while the storm finally began losing strength. Snow still covered everything, but the wind had calmed considerably. Ethan woke first. He stretched carefully, trying not to wake Lily. His back immediately reminded him that pickup trucks were not designed for overnight accommodations. "Worth it," he murmured quietly. A few minutes later, Lily sat up and rubbed her eyes. "Are we alive?" Ethan laughed. "Barely. My neck disagrees." "Mine too." She looked out the window toward the hotel. "Do you think the lady got some sleep?" Ethan started the engine. "I hope so." Together, they walked back inside the hotel to warm up and grab breakfast before continuing their drive home. The lobby looked completely different in daylight. Guests checked out. Families gathered near the restaurant entrance. Employees moved efficiently between stations. The storm emergency atmosphere from the night before had disappeared. Ethan ordered coffee. Lily picked pancakes. For a brief moment, everything felt normal again. Then something unexpected happened. The receptionist from the previous evening spotted them. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Carter?" Ethan smiled politely. "Morning." She hurried around the desk. "You actually stayed in your truck?" That was the general idea. The receptionist looked horrified. "All night. We survived." Lily lifted her orange juice. "Barely." The receptionist shook her head. "I cannot believe you did that." Ethan shrugged. It was one night. Several nearby employees overheard the conversation. Curious glances followed. Ethan immediately regretted becoming the center of attention. He preferred fixing air conditioners to explaining acts of kindness. The receptionist lowered her voice. "The woman from last night asked about you." Ethan looked surprised. "She did. Several times." Before he could ask another question, the elevator doors opened across the lobby. Ethan glanced up casually, then froze. Olivia stepped out carrying the same leather bag. But something about her looked different this morning. Rested, composed. Yet her eyes immediately searched the lobby as though she were looking for someone. The moment she spotted Ethan and Lily, relief crossed her face. She walked toward them. "There you are." Ethan smiled. "Good morning." Olivia looked between him and Lily. "Please tell me you did not actually sleep in your truck." Lily answered before Ethan could. "We totally did." Olivia stared at Ethan. "You were serious?" Ethan laughed softly. "I usually am." For several seconds, she seemed unsure how to respond. Then she glanced toward the receptionist. "You knew?" The receptionist nodded carefully. Olivia exhaled slowly. Not anger. Not frustration. Something closer to guilt. Why would you do that? Ethan had already answered this question once, but somehow it felt different now. "Because you needed the room." Olivia shook her head. "You needed it too." "Maybe. You had a child with you." Ethan looked toward Lily. "She has survived worse." "Dad." "What?" Lily smiled. Olivia studied him carefully. The lobby noise seemed to fade around them. Ethan had noticed this before. She listened differently than most people, as if she genuinely cared about the answer. "Most people would not have done what you did." Ethan stirred his coffee. "Most people are smarter than me." Olivia laughed unexpectedly. It was the first truly unguarded laugh Ethan had heard from her. "I doubt that." Then her expression softened. "Thank you." Ethan nodded. "You already said that." "Not enough." Before he could reply, Olivia's phone began vibrating. She glanced at the screen. For the first time, Ethan noticed a flash of irritation. "I need to take this." "Go ahead." She stepped several feet away. The call lasted less than a minute. Yet when she returned, something had changed. Not in her appearance. In her focus. Her eyes moved across the lobby. The employees. The guests. The building itself. Then back toward Ethan. "I have to leave for a few hours," she said. "Okay. But I would like to see you again before you go." Ethan looked confused. "Why?" Olivia smiled slightly. "Because I have a feeling this conversation is not finished." Ethan did not know how to answer that. Neither did Lily. Moments later, Olivia walked toward the entrance where a black SUV had just arrived outside. Several people exited the vehicle and hurried toward her. Ethan barely noticed them. He was too busy watching Olivia disappear through the revolving doors. What he did not know was that every person rushing to meet her worked for her. And before the day ended, the entire hotel would discover exactly who the mysterious woman in room 814 really was. The black SUV disappeared down the snow-covered street, while Ethan stood near the hotel entrance holding a paper cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Something about Olivia stayed in his thoughts. Not because she was mysterious, not because she was beautiful, because she seemed genuinely troubled by what happened the night before. Most people would have accepted the room and moved on. She kept looking back, as though the gesture mattered more than he understood. Lily finished her pancakes and joined him near the window. She is definitely coming back. Ethan smiled. You sound very sure. I am. Why? Lily shrugged. People do not look at someone like that unless they plan to see them again. Ethan laughed softly. You are 12. Exactly. That does not explain anything. It explains everything. Before Ethan could respond, several luxury vehicles pulled into the circular driveway outside the hotel. One after another. Black SUVs. A silver sedan. Another SUV. Hotel employees immediately noticed. Conversations stopped. Bellhops straightened uniforms. Managers appeared from offices. The atmosphere shifted almost instantly. Ethan frowned. That seems important. Lily pressed closer to the glass. Very important. The front doors opened repeatedly as professionally dressed men and women entered carrying tablets, folders, and phones. None of them looked like guests. They looked like people arriving for a meeting. A very serious meeting. The hotel general manager hurried across the lobby. Two assistant managers followed closely behind him. Employees began whispering. Even guests noticed the sudden activity. The receptionist from the previous evening looked completely overwhelmed. Ethan walked back toward the front desk. Everything okay? She glanced around nervously. Honestly, I have no idea. That is reassuring. She laughed despite herself. Apparently someone important is coming. How important? The receptionist lowered her voice. The owner. Ethan blinked. The owner of the hotel? Not just this hotel. Her eyes widened slightly. The entire company. Lily looked impressed. That sounds expensive. The receptionist laughed. Very expensive. For the next hour, the Grand Summit Hotel transformed. Fresh flowers appeared in the lobby. Managers inspected every corner of the building. Employees adjusted displays that nobody had touched in months. It felt less like a hotel and more like a theater preparing for opening night. Ethan found the entire situation fascinating, mostly because he had no involvement in it whatsoever. He and Lily planned to leave after breakfast and continue home. Yet somehow they kept delaying. Curiosity has a way of extending schedules. Around 11 o'clock, a sleek black helicopter appeared in the distance. Several people rushed toward the front entrance. Guests gathered near windows. Employees lined portions of the lobby. Excitement spread through the building. That cannot be normal, Ethan said. Definitely not normal, the receptionist replied. The helicopter landed on a nearby private pad beyond the parking area. Minutes later, the front doors opened again. A group of executives entered first, then several assistants, then security personnel. Finally, a familiar figure stepped through the entrance. Ethan nearly dropped his coffee. Olivia, the same woman from room 814. The same woman who arrived exhausted and snow-covered the night before. Yet today she looked entirely different. Not because of expensive clothes or professional styling. Because everyone reacted to her presence. Managers moved immediately. Executives straightened posture. Employees greeted her with visible respect. The lobby fell almost silent. Olivia exchanged brief greetings with several people before her eyes scanned the room. Then she saw Ethan. Everything else seemed to disappear. A genuine smile crossed her face. She changed direction immediately. There you are. Ethan stared. Apparently. Olivia laughed softly. I was hoping you had not left. I was hoping I understood what was happening. Lily stepped forward. You came in a helicopter. Olivia smiled. Technically. That is awesome. Ethan looked around the lobby. Managers were watching. Executives were watching. Even guests were watching. Okay, he said slowly. I think I am missing part of the story. Olivia folded her hands calmly. You are missing quite a lot of it. The hotel general manager suddenly appeared beside them. His expression carried the nervous energy of someone trying very hard not to make a mistake. Ms. Bennett, the board meeting is ready whenever you are. Ethan froze. Bennett. The name registered instantly. Grand Summit Hotels. Bennett Hospitality Group. He had seen the logo on highway billboards across 3 states. Olivia noticed the realization forming. Ethan, you own this place. She smiled gently. Yes. Ethan looked around the enormous lobby, then back at her. This entire hotel? Yes. The company too? Yes. Lily's mouth fell open. You are the owner? Olivia laughed. That is what they keep telling me. Complete silence settled over Ethan. Less than 12 hours earlier, he had handed his room key to a tired stranger in a snowstorm. Now that stranger stood in front of him surrounded by executives, managers, and enough authority to own every room in the building. And somehow, judging by the look in Olivia's eyes, the most important part of her day was not the board meeting waiting upstairs. It was finding the man who had treated her like an ordinary human being when nobody else knew who she was. For several seconds, Ethan simply stared at Olivia. The lobby around them continued moving, but everything felt strangely distant. Guests checked out. Employees hurried between stations. Executives waited respectfully nearby. Yet Ethan could focus only on one fact. The woman who had spent the night in room 814 was not merely wealthy. She owned the entire hotel. You could have mentioned that, Ethan finally said. Olivia laughed softly. Would it have changed anything? Ethan thought about it. Probably not. Exactly. Lily looked between them. So you own all these hotels? Olivia nodded. Most of them. How many is most? Olivia smiled. Enough that I stopped counting years ago. Lily's eyes widened. That is a lot. The honesty made several nearby executives smile. Olivia seemed to enjoy Lily's reactions far more than the formal attention surrounding her. The hotel manager cleared his throat carefully. Ms. Bennett, the board members are waiting upstairs. Olivia glanced toward the elevators, then back toward Ethan. They can wait 5 more minutes. The manager immediately nodded. Of course. Ethan noticed something interesting. Everyone seemed eager to please her. Yet Olivia looked far more interested in talking to a man who repaired heating systems than attending a meeting worth millions of dollars. Can I ask you something? She said. Sure. Why did you never tell me you slept in the truck? Ethan laughed. Because you never asked. I assumed you would find another room somewhere. There were no rooms. Olivia lowered her eyes briefly. The realization clearly still bothered her. I should have checked. You did not owe me that. Maybe not. Her voice softened. But I wish I had. Silence settled between them. Not awkward silence. Reflection. The kind that appears when someone discovers a truth they cannot ignore. Olivia finally looked toward Lily. Was it terrible? Lily considered the question carefully. The truck? Yes. The seats were terrible. Olivia laughed. Fair enough. But Dad made it fun. How? Lily smiled. He said we were having an adventure. Ethan shook his head. I may have exaggerated slightly. A lot, Lily corrected. Olivia looked at Ethan for a moment. Something in her expression shifted. Respect. Not for the room. Not for the sacrifice. For the way he handled difficulty without bitterness. That quality was becoming increasingly rare. An assistant approached carefully. Ms. Bennett. Olivia nodded. 1 minute. The assistant stepped back immediately. Ethan glanced toward the executives waiting near the elevators. You should probably go. Olivia ignored the suggestion. Not yet. She folded her arms thoughtfully. Tell me about yourself. Ethan looked surprised. There is not much to tell. Lily immediately laughed. That is not true. Traitor. I learned from the best. Olivia smiled. I am listening. Ethan sighed dramatically. I repair heating and cooling systems. I raise my daughter. I pay too many bills. And what? There has to be more than that. Ethan looked toward the snow-covered mountains visible through the lobby windows. Not really. The answer was sincere. His life was simple. Work, family, responsibility. Olivia seemed unconvinced. People who give away the last hotel room in a blizzard usually have a story. Ethan smiled faintly. Or bad judgment. I do not believe that. For the next 15 minutes they talked. Not about money. Not about business. About life. Ethan shared stories about Lily. About repairing old furnaces in remote mountain cabins. About Rachel. Olivia listened carefully. When Rachel's name entered the conversation, something changed. You still miss her? It was not a question. Ethan nodded. Every day. Olivia's expression softened. I understand that. Ethan noticed a shadow pass briefly across her face. Loss recognized loss. Neither needed further explanation. Then Olivia asked a question nobody expected. Would you have done the same thing if I looked different? Ethan frowned. Different how? If I was older, younger, less friendly, less grateful. Ethan did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward Lily. Then back at Olivia. The weather outside did not care who you were. Complete silence followed. Olivia stared at him. The answer seemed to affect her more than he intended. Finally, she smiled. That might be the best thing anyone has said to me all year. Before Ethan could respond, the hotel manager approached again. This time his nervousness was impossible to hide. Ms. Bennett, the board truly cannot wait any longer. Olivia laughed softly. All right. She reached into her purse and removed a business card. Then she handed it to Ethan. Do not leave yet. Ethan glanced at the card. Why? Because I would like to introduce you to someone. Who? Olivia's smile returned. Mysterious, confident, almost playful. Everyone. Then she turned toward the elevators. Executives immediately followed. Assistants gathered documents. The manager practically exhaled with relief. Within moments, Olivia disappeared upstairs. Ethan looked down at the card in his hand. The elegant silver lettering reflected the lobby lights. Lily leaned closer. Dad. Yeah. I think something big is about to happen. Ethan looked toward the elevator doors that had just closed. Then toward the executives rushing after Olivia. Then back toward the card. For the first time all morning, he had the exact same feeling. For the next hour, Ethan tried convincing himself that nothing unusual was happening. It was not working. He and Lily moved to a seating area near the lobby fireplace, while executives continued flowing in and out of conference rooms upstairs. Every few minutes, another employee hurried past carrying documents or speaking urgently into a headset. The entire hotel seemed to operate at a different speed whenever Olivia Bennett was in the building. Ethan examined the business card again. The paper felt heavier than normal. The silver lettering reflected the light from the fireplace. Lily leaned against the armrest beside him. Are you nervous? No, that means yes. Ethan smiled. Maybe a little. Why? Because people who arrive in helicopters usually have plans. Lily considered that. Good plans or bad plans? That is the question. Before either could say more, the receptionist approached carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. Courtesy of the hotel. Lily immediately accepted hers. Thank you. The receptionist smiled. You are welcome. Then she looked toward Ethan. The entire staff is talking about what you did. Ethan groaned softly. Please tell them to stop. That is not going to happen. I was afraid of that. The receptionist laughed. Most people would have kept the room. Ethan shrugged. Most people were probably smarter. You keep saying that. It keeps being true. The receptionist shook her head and walked away smiling. Ethan settled deeper into the chair. Attention made him uncomfortable. He preferred repairing broken things because furnaces and air conditioners never asked personal questions. People did. Upstairs, meanwhile, Olivia sat at the head of a long conference table overlooking snow-covered mountains. Around her sat executives, regional directors, financial officers, and department leaders. Charts filled large screens. Reports covered the table. Yet Olivia's thoughts kept returning to the lobby. Several times, she found herself staring through the glass walls of the conference room toward the lower floors. Finally, one executive noticed. Is something wrong? Olivia looked back. No, then why do you seem distracted? A faint smile appeared. I met someone interesting. The executive blinked. Interesting how? Olivia glanced toward the snowy landscape outside. He gave away something valuable without knowing who was receiving it. The room fell briefly quiet. One director laughed politely. That is rare these days. Yes, Olivia replied. It is. The meeting continued. Budgets were reviewed. Expansion projects were discussed. Future investments were approved. Yet throughout every conversation, Olivia found herself remembering the image of Ethan and Lily sleeping in an old pickup truck while she occupied the final available room. The thought refused to leave her. Not because she felt guilty, because she felt challenged. Wealth gave people many opportunities. Genuine character was harder to find. Downstairs, Ethan had nearly convinced himself to leave when the hotel manager suddenly appeared. Mr. Carter? Ethan looked up. Yes. The manager smiled nervously. Ms. Bennett would like to see you. Lily's eyes widened immediately. Ethan sighed. Of course she would. 10 minutes later, father and daughter stood outside an elegant private conference suite on the top floor. Through the glass walls, they could see city planners, executives, and legal advisors gathering paperwork. The manager opened the door. Right this way. Ethan stepped inside feeling completely out of place. His work boots seemed especially noticeable against the polished floor. Olivia immediately stood when she saw them enter. You stayed. You told me not to leave. Good answer. Several executives exchanged curious glances. Clearly, they were not accustomed to seeing their chief executive speak this way. Olivia gestured toward two empty chairs. Please sit. Ethan and Lily complied. The room slowly quieted. Dozens of eyes turned toward them. Ethan resisted the urge to find the nearest exit. Olivia looked around the table. Before we continue with today's agenda, I would like everyone to meet someone. The executives waited. Olivia continued. Last night, a winter storm stranded travelers across the region. Heads nodded. Everyone knew that much. When I arrived at this hotel, there were no rooms available. The room remained attentive. One man gave me his. Silence followed. Olivia's voice remained calm, but something deeper moved beneath it. He did not know my name. He did not know my position. He did not know I owned this company. Several executives shifted in their seats. What he did know was that a stranger needed help. The room grew quieter with every sentence. Ethan suddenly wished he could disappear. Lily sat perfectly still beside him. Pride shone in her eyes. Olivia looked directly at Ethan. And because of that decision, he and his daughter spent the night sleeping in a pickup truck. Complete silence settled over the conference room. Not a single person spoke. Not a single chair moved. Dozens of executives stared at Ethan with expressions ranging from surprise to disbelief. And for the first time since arriving at the hotel, Ethan realized this conversation was becoming much bigger than either of them expected. The conference room remained silent long after Olivia finished speaking. Snow-covered mountains stretched beyond the glass walls, but nobody seemed interested in the view anymore. Every executive at the table was looking at Ethan. He shifted slightly in his chair and immediately regretted being there. Recognition felt far less comfortable than sleeping in a pickup truck. Olivia seemed to sense it. Relax, she said gently. You look like you are preparing for a dental appointment. Several people laughed. Ethan smiled despite himself. This is not exactly my normal Tuesday. I certainly hope not. More laughter followed, and some of the tension disappeared. Yet the room remained captivated by the story. One senior executive leaned forward. Mr. Carter, may I ask something? Ethan nodded cautiously. Sure. Why did you do it? Ethan blinked. We covered that already. Humor us. Ethan looked around the table. Dozens of successful people waited for an answer that seemed obvious to him. There was a storm. Silence. She needed a room. More silence. I had one. The executive smiled. That is all. Ethan shrugged. That seemed like enough. Several people exchanged glances. The simplicity of the answer somehow made it more powerful. Olivia rested her hands on the table. That is exactly what surprised me. Her voice became quieter. Nobody knew who I was. She looked around the room. Nobody was watching. Then she looked toward Ethan. There was no reward. Ethan nodded. That was kind of the point. A few executives smiled. Others lowered their eyes thoughtfully. In a world dominated by transactions, they had encountered someone motivated by something much simpler. Character. Olivia stood and walked toward the large windows overlooking the mountains. My grandfather founded this company with one belief. The room listened. He believed hospitality was not about buildings. She turned back toward the table. It was about people. Several board members nodded. They had heard the story before. Yet today it felt different. Over the years we built hotels. Olivia continued. Resorts. Conference centers. Luxury properties. She paused. But sometimes I wonder if we forget why those places exist. The room became still again. Last night reminded me. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. You are giving me way too much credit. Olivia smiled. Maybe. Then she added softly. Or maybe not. An assistant entered carrying several folders. Olivia accepted one and glanced through its contents. Her expression changed slightly. Not dramatically, just enough for Ethan to notice. Interesting. The chief financial officer looked curious. What is it? Olivia looked toward Ethan. Apparently after I left this morning, I asked my team to learn more about Mr. Carter. Ethan laughed. That sounds slightly terrifying. It should. The room laughed again. Olivia opened the folder. You own a small heating and cooling repair company. Ethan nodded. Yes. You employ 3 technicians. Correct. You volunteer at the community center twice a month. Ethan looked surprised. How do you know that? Olivia ignored the question. You have never missed a child support payment for any family service project involving Lily. Lily smiled proudly. That is true. Olivia continued reading. You also repaired heating systems for 3 elderly residents last winter and refused payment. Ethan immediately groaned. Can we stop? No, Olivia looked up. Why did you refuse payment? Because they needed heat. And they could not afford it. Olivia closed the folder slowly. You see the pattern? Nobody answered because the answer was obvious. Ethan helped people whenever he could. Not occasionally. Consistently. Quietly. Without publicity. Without recognition. Olivia returned to her seat. The room was not a random act. Ethan sighed. This is getting uncomfortable. Good. Olivia smiled. Growth usually is. Lily nearly laughed out loud. I like her. I noticed, Ethan replied. One board member raised a hand slightly. Ms. Bennett. Yes. What exactly are we doing here? The question lingered in the room. Olivia folded her hands thoughtfully. That is an excellent question. She looked toward Ethan and Lily. Then toward the executives. For years we have discussed culture, leadership, and values. Heads nodded. Those conversations happen constantly. We write mission statements. Olivia continued. We publish employee handbooks. More nods followed. But today we have an opportunity to recognize someone who actually lives those values. Complete silence returned. Ethan immediately sensed danger. Oh no. Olivia smiled. Oh yes. Lily burst into laughter. Several executives joined her. Olivia stood again and pressed a button on a small control panel near the wall. Moments later, screens throughout the conference room illuminated. Then another executive looked confused. Why are we connecting to every property? Olivia's smile widened. Because if we are going to tell this story, we are going to tell it properly. Ethan stared at the monitors as hotel managers from across the country began appearing one by one. New York, Chicago, Denver, Phoenix, Seattle. Dozens of faces filled the screens. Hundreds of people were suddenly joining the meeting. Ethan slowly looked toward Olivia. What exactly are you planning? Olivia met his gaze. The warmth in her eyes remained. But now there was something else. Determination. I am planning to make sure kindness does not go unnoticed. And as more screens continued lighting up around the room, Ethan realized the audience for this conversation had just become much larger than he ever imagined. The monitors continued lighting up across the conference room until nearly every screen displayed faces from hotels throughout the country. Managers appeared from Boston, Dallas, Miami, Portland, Nashville, and dozens of cities in between. Some sat in conference rooms. Others stood behind front desks. A few looked confused about why they had been summoned with such urgency. Ethan stared at the wall of screens and quietly wondered if it was still possible to escape through the emergency exit. Lily noticed. Do not even think about it. You know me too well. That is my job. Olivia smiled as she stepped toward the center of the room. The conversations on the monitors gradually faded. Hundreds of employees waited for her to speak. Good afternoon, everyone. Her voice carried confidence without arrogance. Thank you for joining on short notice. Faces throughout the screens nodded attentively. Olivia glanced briefly toward Ethan before continuing. Today I would like to tell you a story. Several executives exchanged curious looks. This was not how corporate meetings usually began. Olivia folded her hands. Last night a severe winter storm passed through Colorado. The employees listened. One of our hotels reached full capacity. Heads nodded. Storm emergencies were common. A traveler arrived after every room had been occupied. Olivia paused. She was informed there were no vacancies. Silence settled across the monitors. Then Olivia smiled slightly. Another guest overheard the conversation. Ethan immediately looked down at the floor. He knew exactly where this was going. This guest had reserved the final room. Olivia continued. He had every right to keep it. The room remained silent. Instead, he handed his key card to a complete stranger. Several managers straightened in their chairs. Others leaned closer to their screens. Olivia's voice softened. He did not know her name. Another pause. He did not know her position. The silence deepened. And he certainly did not know she owned the company. Audible reactions appeared from several locations. Not dramatic, just surprised murmurs. Olivia let the realization settle. Then she looked toward Ethan. After giving away the room, he spent the night in his pickup truck with his 12-year-old daughter. Complete silence followed. Across the screens, hundreds of employees sat motionless. Ethan wished the floor would open beneath him. Lily looked proud enough to float. Olivia gestured toward Ethan. His name is Ethan Carter. Cameras automatically shifted focus toward him. Ethan immediately looked uncomfortable. "Please stop doing that." Laughter spread across several locations. Even Olivia laughed. Unfortunately, it is too late. One hotel manager from Atlanta spoke first. "Sir, is that really true?" Ethan sighed. "Apparently, everybody knows now." More laughter followed. Another employee from Seattle shook her head. "Most people would never do that." Ethan shrugged. "Most people did not have my daughter staring at them." Lily grinned. That helped. The room laughed again. Yet beneath the humor, something meaningful was happening. Employees were not looking at Ethan because of money. They were not impressed by status. They were responding to something much rarer. Character. Olivia could feel it too. This company talks a lot about hospitality. She slowly walked across the room. "We discussed service standards, customer experience, and guest satisfaction." Heads nodded throughout the screens. "All of those things matter." She paused. "But none of them matter more than kindness." The conference room fell silent once more. Olivia looked directly into one of the cameras. Last night, a man who had every reason to think about himself chose to think about someone else. Her voice grew quieter. "That is hospitality." No one interrupted. No one checked phones. No one looked away. Even the executives sitting beside her seemed affected. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "You are making this sound bigger than it was." Olivia immediately turned toward him. "No." Her answer came gently, but firmly. "You are making it sound smaller." The room became still. Ethan looked away. Olivia understood why. Truly kind people rarely recognize the value of what they do. To them, kindness feels normal. That was precisely what made it extraordinary. One regional director finally spoke. "Mr. Carter, what made you do it?" Ethan smiled faintly. He had answered that question multiple times already. Yet somehow the answer remained the same. The storm did not care who she was. Silence followed. Olivia lowered her eyes briefly. Several employees visibly reacted. The simplicity of the statement carried more weight than a speech ever could. Then something unexpected happened. A hotel manager from Denver began clapping. Slowly at first. Then another employee joined. Then another. Within seconds, applause spread across dozens of screens. Hundreds of people were standing, smiling, clapping. Not because Ethan had sought recognition. Because he never had. The sound filled the conference room. Ethan looked completely overwhelmed. Lily reached over and squeezed his arm. "See," she whispered. Ethan swallowed hard and looked around at the faces filling every monitor. For the first time all day, he realized something Olivia understood from the beginning. The story was never about a hotel room. It was about reminding people that kindness still existed. And judging by the standing ovation unfolding across the country, hundreds of people had just remembered. The applause continued far longer than Ethan expected. Across dozens of screens, employees remained standing. Some smiled. Some wiped tears from their eyes. Others simply kept clapping, as though they were celebrating something they had not seen in a very long time. Genuine goodness has a strange effect on people. It reminds them of the person they hope they still are. Eventually, the applause began to fade. One screen after another returned to silence. Employees resumed their seats. Conference rooms settled. Yet the atmosphere had changed completely. The meeting was no longer about quarterly reports or future developments. It had become something much more personal. Olivia remained standing at the front of the room. Her expression reflected gratitude, but also determination. She glanced around at the executives seated beside her, then toward the hundreds of employees still connected through the screens. "I have one more thing to share." The room immediately quieted. Ethan felt a familiar sense of concern. Every time Olivia said those words, something unexpected followed. "Oh no," he muttered. Lily laughed quietly. "You keep saying that." "Because it keeps being true." Olivia heard him and smiled. "You really should trust me more." "That depends entirely on what comes next." Several executives laughed. Olivia opened another folder resting on the conference table. "After learning about Mr. Carter this morning, I asked our team to gather additional information." Ethan covered his face briefly. "Of course you did." Olivia ignored him. "What we discovered was not a single act of kindness." She turned a page. It was a pattern. The room listened carefully. Over the last 5 years, Ethan has repaired heating systems for senior citizens who could not afford repairs. Several employees exchanged surprised glances. He has volunteered for local school maintenance projects. Another page turned. He has provided emergency service during severe weather without charging additional fees. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. That sounds worse when you read it out loud. I disagree, Olivia replied. Laughter spread through the room. Yet the deeper message remained. The room key was not an exception. It was simply another chapter in the same story. Olivia looked directly at the cameras. Many companies spend millions trying to define their values. She paused. Today we are looking at ours. Silence followed. Even the executives appeared reflective. Then an older board member spoke for the first time. Ms. Bennett. Yes. May I say something? Olivia nodded. The man stood slowly. His silver hair and calm demeanor carried the quiet authority of someone who had spent decades leading organizations. I have served on this board for 21 years. The room listened. I have attended hundreds of meetings. He looked toward Ethan. I do not remember many of them. A faint smile appeared. But I will remember this one. Complete silence followed. The words landed with surprising force. Not because they were dramatic. Because they were sincere. Olivia nodded respectfully. Thank you. The board member sat down. Ethan looked toward the floor again. Recognition still felt unnatural. He had spent most of his life avoiding attention. Yet no matter how uncomfortable he became, he could not deny one thing. Lily was glowing with pride. Every time he looked at her, he saw the same expression. Not excitement. Respect. The kind every parent hopes to earn. Olivia noticed it too. Lily. The young girl looked up. Yes. What do you think about your father? Ethan immediately closed his eyes. This is not going to end well. Lily grinned. I think he is exactly the same person at home. The room laughed softly. Olivia smiled. Explain. Lily thought for a moment. He always helps people. She shrugged as though discussing something obvious. That is just who he is. Silence returned. Her answer carried none of the sophistication adults often use. It carried something more powerful. Truth. Olivia lowered her eyes briefly. Then she looked toward the employees on the screens. There it is. Nobody spoke. The simplest description is usually the most accurate. The room remained perfectly still. Then Olivia closed the folder and placed both hands on the conference table. Her expression changed slightly. The warmth remained. But now there was purpose behind it. This morning, I asked myself a question. Everyone listened. What should happen when someone demonstrates the very values we claim to admire? No one answered. The question lingered. Olivia looked toward Ethan. I believe kindness deserves more than applause. Ethan immediately became suspicious. There it is. Olivia smiled. What? The dangerous part. Laughter spread across the room again. Yet Olivia did not look amused this time. She looked serious. Determined. Several executives seemed to recognize the expression. They sat up straighter. One of them even smiled knowingly. Whatever Olivia was about to say, it had clearly not been discussed beforehand. Ethan noticed the reactions. So did Lily. Father and daughter exchanged a glance. The same thought crossed both their minds. Something important was about to happen. Outside the conference room windows, sunlight reflected across miles of fresh snow. Inside, hundreds of employees waited silently. Olivia took a slow breath and stepped away from the table. Then she walked directly toward Ethan. And as she stopped in front of him, the entire company seemed to hold its breath at once. The conference room became so quiet that Ethan could hear the faint hum of the heating system behind the walls. Hundreds of employees remained connected through screens across the country. Executives sat motionless around the table. Even the snow-covered landscape outside seemed frozen in place. Olivia stood directly in front of Ethan. Her expression was calm, but there was unmistakable purpose in her eyes. Ethan had seen that look before. Usually right before a repair job became far more complicated than expected. I do not like this expression, he said carefully. Several people laughed. Olivia smiled. That is because you are anticipating trouble. Experience has taught me caution. Experience has made you suspicious. More laughter echoed through the room. Even Ethan smiled. Yet beneath the humor, everyone sensed something important approaching. Olivia folded her hands. Last night, you gave away a room because someone needed help. Ethan nodded. Yes. You did not ask for recognition. Correct. You did not expect a reward. Definitely correct. Olivia looked toward Lily. And yet your daughter spent the night in a truck. Lily raised her hand. To be fair, we had blankets. The room laughed again. Olivia shook her head affectionately. Thank you for the clarification. Then her expression grew serious once more. The truth is that I have spent years meeting successful people. She slowly walked around the table. I meet investors, executives, politicians, celebrities, and industry leaders. No one interrupted. Many of them are talented. She paused. Some are brilliant. Another pause. But character is different. The room listened carefully. Olivia stopped beside the large windows overlooking the mountains. Character reveals itself when nobody is watching. Her gaze returned to Ethan. That is why this matters. Ethan shifted in his chair. Compliments still made him uncomfortable. Olivia continued. This company was built on service. She gestured toward the screens displaying hundreds of employees. Every hotel, every employee, every guest experience begins with one simple question. Silence followed. Do we genuinely care about people? The question lingered in the room. Olivia nodded toward Ethan. Last night, he answered that question better than any mission statement ever could. Several executives quietly nodded. The board member who had spoken earlier smiled approvingly. Then Olivia returned to the head of the table and opened another folder. Ethan immediately groaned. There is another folder. There is. That cannot be good. For once, I disagree. The room chuckled softly. Olivia removed a document. This morning, before coming here, I reviewed several open positions within Bennett Hospitality Group. Ethan stared at her. Why? Because I was curious. That explanation feels incomplete. It probably is. More laughter followed. Yet now people leaned forward. The atmosphere had changed from reflection to anticipation. Olivia placed the document on the table. One of our regional community outreach programs has been struggling. Several executives nodded. They clearly knew the initiative. The position oversees charitable service projects, emergency assistance programs, and partnerships with local communities. Olivia continued. It requires leadership, trust, and genuine concern for people. She looked toward Ethan. The position remains vacant. Ethan felt a growing sense of concern. Lily noticed immediately. Dad looks nervous. Dad should be nervous, Olivia replied. The room laughed again. Then Olivia became serious. Mr. Carter. Ethan immediately disliked how formal that sounded. Yes. I would like to offer you an opportunity. Silence settled over the room. Every screen remained focused on the conversation. Not because you gave away a hotel room. Olivia clarified. Not because of publicity. Another pause. Because I believe our company needs more people who think the way you do. Ethan blinked. For several seconds, he genuinely had no response. He looked toward Lily, then toward the executives, then back at Olivia. You are serious. Very. Ethan leaned back in his chair. I repair heating systems. Olivia nodded. You also build trust. That is not a job title. Maybe it should be. Several people smiled. The room remained completely attentive. Ethan looked down at his hands. The offer itself was surprising. But what surprised him more was the sincerity behind it. Olivia was not trying to impress anyone. She meant every word. I do not know anything about corporate leadership. Good. Olivia's answer came immediately. Ethan frowned. Good. Some of the worst decisions I have ever seen came from people who thought they knew everything. Laughter spread through the room again. Even several executives laughed a little too hard. Olivia continued. Skills can be taught. Her voice softened. Character cannot. Silence followed. Deep silence. The kind that arrives when people recognize a truth. Ethan looked toward Lily once more. She was smiling. Not excited. Proud. The same expression he had seen all day. And somehow that affected him more than the job offer itself. Olivia noticed. You do not need to answer today. Ethan exhaled slowly. Relief appeared immediately. Thank goodness. But I would like you to consider it. She smiled warmly. Because I think people deserve second chances to discover what they are capable of. The room remained still. Snow continued falling gently beyond the windows. Hundreds of employees watched from across the country. And for the first time since entering the hotel, Ethan realized the opportunity in front of him was not really about employment. It was about being seen. Truly seen. And that realization was far more difficult to ignore than any offer Olivia could place on the table. For a long moment after Olivia finished speaking, nobody said anything. The offer remained suspended in the air like freshly fallen snow. Outside the conference room windows, sunlight reflected across the mountains. Inside, hundreds of employees continued watching from screens across the country. Yet all attention remained focused on Ethan. He looked down at the business card still resting in front of him. Less than 24 hours earlier, He had been driving through a snowstorm worried about road conditions and fuel costs. Now he was sitting in a boardroom surrounded by executives discussing opportunities he never imagined. Life had a strange sense of timing. "I think I need a minute," Ethan finally said. Several people smiled. Olivia nodded immediately. "That is a reasonable response." "Good." Ethan exhaled slowly. "Because my brain is currently trying to catch up." Laughter spread through the room. The tension eased slightly. Olivia returned to her seat. "Take all the time you need." Ethan appreciated the answer. She was not pressuring him. She genuinely wanted him to think about it. That mattered. Too many important decisions were made too quickly. Lily sat quietly beside him. For once she had no joke ready. She simply watched her father, the same way she had watched him every day since Rachel passed away. Through difficult repairs, through late nights, through unpaid invoices and unexpected setbacks. She understood better than anyone what those years had cost him. One executive finally spoke. "Mr. Carter, may I ask a personal question?" Ethan nodded cautiously. "Depends how personal." More laughter followed. The executive smiled. "What was the hardest part after your wife passed away?" The room immediately grew quieter. Ethan's expression softened. The answer arrived faster than expected. The silence. Nobody moved. "People prepare you for responsibility." He continued. "Bills. Parenting. Work." His eyes drifted briefly toward the snowy mountains outside. "Nobody prepares you for how quiet the house becomes." Complete silence filled the room. Even through the screens, employees listened carefully. Ethan rarely spoke about Rachel. Not because the memories hurt, because some memories felt sacred. "For a while," he continued, "I thought strength meant handling everything alone." He smiled faintly. "Turns out I was wrong." Olivia listened without interruption. So did everyone else. Ethan glanced toward Lily. "The truth is, she helped me more than I helped her." Lily immediately shook her head. "That is not true." "It absolutely is." "Dad." "Lily." The room laughed softly. Yet several people wiped away tears. The exchange carried a simple honesty that resonated far beyond the conference room. Olivia folded her hands. "That right there." She looked around the table. "That is leadership." Ethan frowned. "I am talking about my daughter." "Exactly." The answer surprised him. Olivia continued. "Leadership is not titles." Her voice remained calm. "It is responsibility." She gestured toward Lily. "You showed up every day for someone who depended on you." Silence followed. "That matters." Ethan looked down again. Recognition still felt unfamiliar. Yet he could no longer dismiss every compliment. Too many people meant it sincerely. One board member leaned forward. "May I tell you something?" Ethan nodded. "Sure." The older man smiled. "Years ago, my father owned a small hardware store." Ethan listened. He used to say that character is what remains after convenience disappears. The room became still. The board member pointed gently toward Ethan. "Last night convenience disappeared." Silence. Character remained. No one spoke. The observation settled deeply into the room. Olivia nodded slowly. "That might be the best definition I have ever heard." Across the screens, employees seemed equally affected. Many nodded in agreement. Some took notes. Others simply reflected. The conversation had moved beyond hospitality, beyond business. It had become a conversation about who people chose to be when life became difficult. Then something unexpected happened. A woman appeared on one of the larger screens from a hotel in Ohio. She raised her hand. Olivia smiled. "Yes." The manager looked emotional. "I just wanted to say thank you." Olivia tilted her head slightly. "For what?" The woman looked directly toward Ethan through the camera. "For reminding us that kindness is still normal somewhere." Silence followed. Another employee from Arizona spoke next. Then one from Oregon. Then another from Tennessee. One after another, stories emerged. Small acts of generosity. Moments of compassion. Examples of people helping strangers. Suddenly, the meeting transformed again. It was no longer about Ethan alone. His story had opened a door. People began remembering their own reasons for caring. Olivia watched quietly. A smile slowly appeared. This was exactly what she hoped would happen. Not celebration. Inspiration. 20 minutes later, the discussion finally settled. The atmosphere felt different now. Lighter. Warmer. More human. Olivia looked toward Ethan once more. "Do you know what happened here today?" Ethan smiled. "I am afraid you are going to tell me." Laughter returned. Olivia nodded. "You reminded an entire company why it exists." Complete silence followed. No one laughed this time, because everyone understood she meant it. And as sunlight continued spilling across the snow-covered mountains outside, Ethan realized something remarkable. The room he gave away had lasted one night. The impact of that decision might last much longer. The meeting officially ended an hour later, but almost nobody seemed eager to leave. Employees across the country slowly disconnected from the conference screens. Executives gathered documents. Assistants organized schedules. Yet conversations continued everywhere. Small groups stood discussing the story they had just witnessed. Others reflected quietly. Something meaningful had happened inside that room, and everyone felt it. Ethan remained seated for a few moments after most people left. The day had become larger than anything he could have predicted. He stared through the glass wall at the mountains glowing beneath the afternoon sun. Snow sparkled across the slopes like scattered diamonds. The storm that had caused all of this was gone now. Only the evidence remained. Olivia approached carrying 2 cups of coffee. "You look exhausted." Ethan accepted one gratefully. "I slept in a truck." "Fair point." They shared a quiet laugh. For the first time all day, neither was surrounded by executives or employees. It was simply 2 people sitting beside a window overlooking the mountains. Lily sat nearby reading messages on a tablet provided by one of the hotel managers. Every few minutes, she smiled at something and shook her head in disbelief. Olivia glanced toward her. "How is she handling all of this?" Ethan followed her gaze. "Better than I am." "That seems accurate." Another laugh passed between them. Then silence settled comfortably. Not awkward. Reflective. The kind of silence that appears when people no longer need to impress one another. After a few moments, Olivia spoke. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan nodded. "Sure." She stared out the window. Last year was difficult. Her voice carried a quiet honesty he had not heard before. Most people assume success solves everything. Ethan listened. It does not. Olivia smiled faintly. Not even close. The mountains reflected in the glass before them. "I spent so much time managing problems that I started forgetting why I built any of it." Ethan remained silent. Sometimes listening mattered more than speaking. Olivia continued. "Every meeting felt the same. Every report felt the same. Every decision became numbers." She shook her head slightly. "At some point, you start wondering if anything you do still matters." Ethan understood more than she realized. Different circumstances. Same question. "And then?" he asked. Olivia smiled. "Then a stranger gave away his hotel room." Silence followed. Gentle. Meaningful. Ethan lowered his eyes. "You keep making that sound bigger than it was." Olivia immediately shook her head. "No." Her voice remained soft but certain. "I keep seeing it exactly the way it was." Neither spoke for several moments. Across the lobby below, guests checked in. Employees welcomed travelers. Life continued. Yet something between them had changed. Not romance. Not obligation. Respect. Genuine respect earned through shared honesty. Lily eventually walked over carrying the tablet. "You two are having serious adult conversations again." Olivia laughed. "Apparently. You should stop." "Why?" Lily smiled. "Because serious adults always forget to eat." Olivia looked surprised. "That is actually true." Ethan pointed toward his daughter. "She has years of observational data." Lily folded her arms proudly. "Exactly." A short time later, they moved to a private dining room overlooking the mountains. Nothing extravagant. Just a late lunch shared between people who no longer felt like strangers. Conversation flowed easily. Stories emerged. Ethan described memorable repair jobs. Lily shared school adventures. Olivia talked about traveling across the country opening hotels. For the first time since they met, laughter came more frequently than reflection. Yet beneath every conversation remained a quiet awareness. None of them would have been sitting there if one simple choice had been different. Eventually, the afternoon sun began sinking lower in the sky. Long shadows stretched across the snow. Ethan glanced at the clock. "We should probably head home." Lily nodded reluctantly. "Yeah." Olivia's smile softened. "I was afraid you might say that." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just honest. Ethan stood slowly. "Thank you." Olivia looked surprised. "For what?" "For reminding my daughter that good things still happen." Olivia glanced toward Lily, then back at Ethan. "I think she already knew that." The answer lingered between them. As they walked toward the hotel entrance, employees smiled and waved. Some thanked Ethan personally. Others simply nodded with quiet respect. The recognition still felt strange, but he accepted it more comfortably now. Outside, the world looked completely different from the previous night. The storm had vanished. Blue sky stretched across the horizon. Snow-covered peaks shimmered in the distance. Beside the entrance, Ethan's old pickup truck waited exactly where he left it. Olivia stopped near the vehicle and looked at it for a moment. Then she smiled. "You know something?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What?" Olivia pointed toward the truck. "That may be the most valuable vehicle in Colorado." Ethan laughed. "It definitely does not look like it." "Maybe not." Her eyes reflected quiet gratitude. "But without it, none of this happens." For a moment, all three stood together beneath the bright winter sky. And although none of them realized it yet, the goodbye they were preparing to say would not be the end of the story. The drive home should have felt ordinary. Yet nothing about it did. Ethan guided the pickup truck along snow-lined highways while the late afternoon sun painted the mountains gold. Lily sat beside him, unusually quiet. Every so often she glanced out the window and smiled to herself. Finally, Ethan noticed. "What?" Lily shrugged. "Nothing. That is never true." She laughed softly. "I was just thinking. Dangerous activity." "Dad." "Sorry." For a few miles they drove in comfortable silence. Then Lily looked toward him again. "Mom would have loved today." The words settled gently inside the cab. Ethan tightened his hands around the steering wheel for a moment. Not because the memory hurt, because it mattered. "Yeah," he said quietly. "She would have." Outside, sunlight shimmered across fields of untouched snow. The storm was gone. Only beauty remained. Sometimes life worked that way. The hardest nights often left behind the clearest mornings. 3 weeks passed. Then 4. Winter slowly loosened its grip on Colorado. Ethan returned to work. Furnaces broke. Air conditioners needed repairs. Bills arrived exactly on schedule. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. Yet something had changed. Not because of the attention. The attention eventually faded. Something deeper remained. People seemed a little kinder. Customers smiled more. Employees at the hotel chain continued sharing stories of generosity inspired by the meeting. Quiet ripples moved outward in ways nobody could fully measure. Then one Thursday afternoon, Ethan's phone rang. He recognized the number immediately. "Olivia." He answered. "Should I be worried?" Her laughter filled the line. "That depends." "That answer worries me." "I thought it might." Ethan smiled despite himself. "What is going on?" "I have a question." "That sounds dangerous too." "Probably." She paused briefly. "Have you thought about the offer?" Ethan looked through the window of his small office. Outside, one of his technicians was loading equipment into a service van. Normal life. Familiar life. Good life. "I have." "And?" Ethan smiled. "I think I would like to help." Silence followed. Not because Olivia was surprised. Because she was happy. "Good." Her voice softened. "I was hoping you would say that." Several months later, the new community outreach program officially launched. Ethan never became a corporate executive. He never wanted to. Instead, he helped coordinate service projects across multiple states. Emergency assistance programs, community partnerships, heating repairs for elderly residents, support for struggling families. Practical help delivered with dignity. Exactly the kind of work he believed mattered. Olivia remained deeply involved. Sometimes they spoke several times a week. Sometimes only once. Yet every conversation carried the same foundation. Respect. Trust. Shared purpose. One autumn afternoon, nearly a year after the storm, they returned together to the Grand Summit Hotel. The mountains looked different without snow. Golden leaves covered the hillsides. The air smelled of pine and approaching evening. Employees greeted them warmly as they entered the lobby. Ethan stopped near the front desk and smiled. "This is where everything started." Olivia looked around the room. "Actually, I think it started before that." "What do you mean?" She smiled. "I think it started when you became the kind of person who would give away the room." Silence settled between them. The good kind. The kind that carries truth. Nearby, Lily rolled her eyes affectionately. "You two are doing serious conversations again." Olivia laughed. "Apparently." Ethan shook his head. "We really are." They walked together toward the large windows overlooking the mountains. The same windows where a tired stranger had once stood after a snowstorm. The same building where one simple decision changed multiple lives. Guests moved through the lobby. Employees welcomed travelers. Life continued exactly as it should. Yet beneath the ordinary activity existed something extraordinary. Proof that kindness still mattered. Proof that dignity still mattered. Proof that grace still mattered. Ethan looked out across the fading light and thought about how close he came to keeping the room. One different choice. One different moment. An entirely different future. Olivia seemed to read his thoughts. Any regrets? Ethan smiled. The answer came instantly. Not one. Outside, evening sunlight settled across the mountains. Inside, the lobby glowed warmly. People talked, laughed, traveled, dreamed, and for one brief moment, everything became still. Not empty, not silent, peaceful. The kind of peace that arrives when a person discovers that kindness never truly disappears. It simply waits, quietly, patiently, until the right moment comes along and turns a small act of grace into a miracle no one saw coming.